When we speak of empires, we usually speak of borders, wars, and treaties. But the real empire, the one that lived and breathed, existed not on maps, but in gestures, in the sound of silk brushing across marble floors, in the faint perfume that lingered after a ball, in the bow of a gloved hand and the unspoken hierarchies behind every smile. Life in the Habsburg realm was not improvised. It was choreographed like an eternal dance. Every greeting, every letter, every afternoon visit followed invisible rules of grace. The empire was, above all, a theater of order, where beauty replaced speed and ceremony was a form of faith. The day began slowly in the houses of the Viennese elite. Curtains opened not with haste, but with ceremony, to let the first pale light fall on portraits of ancestors. Servants moved silently, their shoes muted by thick carpets. The smell of freshly ground coffee mixed with the faint scent of wax polish and lilies from the previous evening's soiree. Breakfast itself was a small performance. Silver trays, porcelain cups, thinly sliced bread, butter, and apricot jam from the estates of Lower Austria. Newspapers were ironed before being read to avoid smudging the ink. And even solitude had its etiquette. No one appeared in public before their toilette was complete. These mornings were not about activity, but about composure, a reminder that dignity began with stillness. For the aristocracy, leisure was not idleness. It was proof of refinement. Riding before noon in the Prater Park, fencing at the academy, or playing the piano in a salon. Each pastime was a declaration of one's place in society. The young counts and baronesses were educated not only in history and languages, but in posture, timing, and the art of appearing effortless. They could quote Goethe and order a servant with the same elegance. Afternoons were filled with visits, carriage rides, and endless tea tables where nothing urgent was ever discussed. Gossip about a new opera or a rumored engagement was as vital as political news. Perhaps more so because it maintained the rhythm of belonging. Beneath this refined idleness lay a quiet purpose, to preserve the illusion of permanence. When evening arrived, the empire transformed into ritual once again. Dinner was not a meal. It was a ceremony of status and poise. Candles glowed against mirrors, multiplying the light into infinity. Crystal, silver, porcelain, all perfectly aligned, all whispering of order. Guests were seated according to rank, not friendship. The conversation followed a hierarchy too. One spoke only when addressed by someone of higher station. The dishes, consommé, venison, torte, arrived in flawless rhythm. Servants moved like shadows. But what mattered was not the food, but the choreography. Who sat where, who laughed when, who noticed whom. The true feast was the display of restraint, an empire holding itself together through the art of self-control. And then as the city lights dimmed, came the empire's true language, music. The waltz was not merely a dance, it was the heartbeat of a civilization. Strauss, Lehar, Schubert. Their melodies carried the empire's pulse from Vienna to Prague, from Budapest to Lviv. In the grand ballrooms, women in white gowns moved like drifting snow, and men in uniforms polished to mirror shine bowed with military precision. The chandeliers trembled slightly with the rhythm of the dance, and for those few hours, the empire believed in eternity. Behind the masks, however, there was also melancholy. Each ball was both celebration and denial. A waltz against the clock. Outside, factories smoked. Inside, violins wept with the beauty of a world that sensed its own fragility. Away from the salons, aristocratic life was quieter, but no less ritualized. Marriages were arranged with care. A balance of fortune, lineage, and discretion. Love, if it appeared, was treated as a pleasant accident, not a reason for union. Women of the nobility spent their time managing estates, hosting charities, writing letters, and mastering the social art of being present yet untouchable. Men divided their loyalties between regiments, hunting lodges, and the imperial bureaucracy. Some found solace in art or philosophy, others in secret affairs hidden behind heavy drapes. But all shared a single unwritten law: appearance above emotion. To lose composure was to lose one's class. By the late 19th century, the empire began to hear a different rhythm. Trains thundered across the countryside, telegraphs clicked, machines replaced hands. The modern world was arriving, fast, loud, impatient. In Vienna, cafes filled with students, poets, and revolutionaries. New ideas challenged old manners. Freud spoke of the unconscious while Strauss still conducted waltzes. The empire's elite continued their rituals, pretending the world outside the ballroom did not exist. Yet beneath the walls, there was a crack, small at first, then widening. Languages multiplied, nationalism stirred, and the elegant facade began to tremble under the weight of reality. When Franz Joseph died in 1916, an era died with him. He had been more than a ruler. He was the personification of order itself. His death felt like the extinguishing of a candle that had lit Europe's old room for a century. 2 years later, the empire dissolved into silence. The palaces remained, but their mirrors reflected only ghosts. The noble titles faded, but the memory of grace lingered. In the way Vienna's waiters still bow slightly, in the perfection of a cup of coffee, in the faint echo of a waltz that still haunts the Danube's air. Today, when we walk through Vienna, Budapest or Prague, the stones still whisper the old language of the empire, a language of dignity, restraint, and melancholy beauty. We live in an age of speed, yet something in us still longs for that calm precision, for that ritual of presence the old world once mastered. The empire is gone, but in 1,000 gestures, the turn of a key, the creak of parquet, the sigh before a melody, it still breathes. Its ghost does not demand to return. It simply asks to be remembered.